Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
What if your emotional life didn't have to feel like a constant reaction or a constant recovery? Welcome to the International Awareness Integration Institute Virtual Clinic, a global online clinic offering psychotherapy, coaching, integrative well-being services, and mind-body practices, all in one place. At International Awareness Integration Institute, we don't just talk about change, we train it. Our work is guided by awareness integration theory, an evidence-based psychological and educational model designed to reduce anxiety and depression patterns, strengthen emotional regulation, and help you build a life that feels meaningful, steady, and fulfilling. Whether you're navigating stress, relationship strain, burnout, life transitions, trauma symptoms, or simply the feeling that you've outgrown your old life, you'll find a clear path forward here, supported by licensed professionals and expert practitioners. If you're ready to feel better, think clearer, and live fully, join the International Awareness Integration Institute Virtual Clinic today. Visit awarenessintegration.com and book your first session or join our membership.
Piece becomes huge because I think anyone that's not in a male body, and particularly a Black woman body, has more access. I see a lot of my Black women friends and partners have a lot of access to touch and holding and walking, holding hands of just almost casual, not even thinking about touch. It just seems so appropriate. It's like, oh, that's just what they do, right? It's beautiful, it's whatever. And even they have their own complexity around touch, which we have investigated. It does seem way more accessible. When I look at men, and particularly around the race component, white men have a hard time with this as well, but they don't have this hypersexualization piece that feels more dangerous for Black bodies. But I've spoken and have worked with and currently work with several groups of white men that do struggle with Platonic touch like men in America do. So there definitely is a cross-pollination, but I do see an extra barrier, I'll call it propaganda, that is positioning Black men as not only being tough, but our sexual energy, our sexual identities is extreme. It's always like this hyperized, expanded. It's the most aggressive. So it becomes this like almost, it becomes the identity. It becomes almost all of.
Introducing a powerful new update from the Foojan app. Now with flexible subscription plans to fit your journey monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Our new AI-driven onboarding customizes your path to feeling better, faster, and enjoy a refreshed experience with stunning 3D interactive videos. Update now. Empower your inner voice with Foojan. Download today. If you've been doing your best, but still feel stuck in anxiety, relationship stress, or the weight of old patterns, this is where things begin to shift. At the Awareness Integration Institute Virtual Clinic, we offer something different. We provide two pathways forward. In psychotherapy, our licensed clinicians help heal unresolved trauma, reduce anxiety and depression, and navigate life transitions. In coaching, our certified coaches help you build confidence, leadership, and relationship mastery, turning insight into decisive action. Both are guided by Dr. Foojan Zeine's evidence-based awareness integration theory, a structured roadmap from awareness to integration to action. During our summit, save 25% on all services from March 22nd through 29th. Visit awarenessintegration.com to book your first session or request to be matched with the right provider.
Welcome to Inner Voice. This is a heartfelt chat where we explore how clear the past, create a new future, and live a fulfilled life now. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist, a life and a business coach, author, speaker, and the founder of the International Awareness Integration Institute. So each week, I bring you a heartfelt conversation about healing, self-awareness, relationships, mind-body well-being, emotional clarity, and creating a life that feels true to who you are. So today, I will be talking with Aaron Johnson. He's a public speaker, a facilitator, a filmmaker, and a touch activist Yes, a touch activist focused on the emotional and relational lives of Black men and is the founder of Chronically UnderTouched Cut Project and the co-founder and the holistic resistance and grief to action. His work supports Black men in moving from a lack of Platonic touch toward touch balance, creating spaces rooted in tenderness, care, and deep listening across diverse identities and experiences. Based in the Mojave Desert in California, Aaron also creates films, retreats, and land-based healing spaces that challenges harmful stereotype and center of softness, intimacy, and collective liberation. My intention is that this conversation touches your heart, awakens your awareness, and gives you something meaningful to carry into your life. Now let's begin. Here's Aaron Johnson.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Yeah, sometimes the mind understands, but the body still holds the stress. That's why the International Awareness Integration Institute Virtual Clinic offers mind-body services that help you regulate your nervous system, restore calm, and return to yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally. Our reflective practices include guided mindfulness, breath work, yoga, and grounding exercises, and specifically curated to support emotional regulation and physiological calm. Our somatic integration practices are a refined body-led approach where healing begins with presence, working with breath, sensation, posture, and gentle movement so resilience becomes felt, not forced. And for those who want deeper whole person support, we offer functional well-being guidance, addressing the interplay between hormonal balance, digestion, sleep architecture, and lifestyle factors with a root cause holistic framework. This is not self-care as a luxury. This is self-regulation as a life skill and a pathway to fulfillment. Choose the support your body and life have been asking for. Visit awarenessintegration.com to join a weekly meditation, explore somatic healing, breathwork, yoga-inspired movement, or functional medicine services, and start feeling the difference.
Aaron Johnson, welcome to the show. So nice to have you.
It's so good to be here with you.
So tell us about you, your experience, and what brought you to want to share with the rest of the world through your documentary and through your work about your experience, and not only your experience, but bring the experience of Black men to our audience. And I want you, as I shared with you before we started, is educate me.
Right.
I don't know. And I'm not going to pretend that I know, because I think that's arrogant and ignorant. Right. So tell me.
Yeah. Well, about me, I think to start out is that I had a big tragedy, which oftentimes forces or invites an evaluation of how do I heal from this without having a real team around me that I've established. And so the death of my father, 2010, was the tragedy that helped me notice that I was unable to cry, that I was unable to feel, and that I had no particular friend network, family network that was prepared to hold me in my tragedy. Everyone was sad with me, but no one really had context of like, how do we hold you at the center of this tragedy? As death happens, I was the one that found his remains shortly after he passed. It's a pretty painful experience. It's not just a shock of someone you saw 5 minutes before, then dead in an accident working on their truck. There was the other grief around that. And literally, I was unable to cry for that event, for that tragedy, for 3 years, or 2.5. I spent, after 3 years of not crying, I spent a year reclaiming my tears, just being able to not just cry about my father, but to be able to feel and process all the things that I might have been touching. And miraculously, I had a really great team. I kind of miraculously was able to pull together. Um, and in that journey of realizing that tears were such a problem, I also recognized that I wanted to be held platonically. And that became like a way bigger task than I think it should have. I thought, oh, I'll just reach out to my wife and say, okay, how do we? And she was like, great, I'm down. But I was like, I need more than just her. I need a collective of different humans and nature to hold me. And I went on my own personal journey. And in that personal journey, I realized, it felt like there was a bigger problem in this country, that platonic touch was such a novel and rare um, thing for my positionality. I have been wanting cuddles since I was born, literally, and it never really left my heart's desire, but I got quiet about it. And so I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, I'm like 32, when I really started to put some effort in building. And in that journey, I found a profound nourishment and my platonic touch narrative. But in that investigation, I saw that there was a cultural resistance, particularly here in the United States, of me asking for a platonic touch. People completely confuse it with sexual touch and then inflate it with the hypersexualization that's normalized in America of Black men. And so I started seeing this constant barrier, what I will, shorthand here call the Black brute. There's other words that oftentimes are used in association, but the Black brute is a common phrase I can use to articulate the archetype that people put on my body, put on my identity, especially when I'm reaching for a platonic touch. And so that was something I just noticed. And so that was a big defining fact in my own journey. And in my TEDx talk, I kind of go in kind of a story mode around how it went from my personal practice, which I thought it was going to stay there, to transferring to one of my mentees who needed a tremendous amount of touch, a tremendous amount of nervous system regulation, platonically, and how difficult and educational it was for me to spend a year and some, but a year specifically to get him to a place where he invited in soft, tender, platonic touch that felt good for his nervous system and for our relationship. And the complexity there with him, he was about, in his maybe 20 years old by the time he got to the point of actual touch, but 18, 19 when he first started his journey. I realized this was a problem across the country. And that was the first mental note of like, maybe I could work on this beyond just this one man and myself. So that's kind of my origin story of how I arrived here.
Did you find that this is about the distinction between men and women, or is it a more distinction between white and Black, or a combination of the two?
Really both. When I think about Black women or Black, I think about gender and race. The gender piece becomes huge because I think anyone that's not in a male body, and specifically a Black woman body, has more access. I see a lot of my Black women friends and partners have a lot of access to touch and holding and walking, holding hands are just almost casual, not even thinking about touch. It just seems so appropriate. It's like, oh, that's just what they do, right? It's beautiful. It's whatever. And even they have their own complexity around touch, which we have investigated. It does seem way more accessible. When I look at men, and particularly around the race component, white men have a hard time with this as well, but they don't have this hypersexualization piece that feels more dangerous for Black bodies. But I've spoken and have worked with and currently work with several groups of white men that do struggle with platonic touch like men in America do. So there definitely is a cross-pollination, but I do see an extra barrier, I'll call it propaganda, that is positioning Black men as not only being tough, but our sexual energy, our sexual identities is extreme. It's always like this hyperized, expanded. It's the most aggressive. So it becomes this like almost it becomes the identity. It becomes almost all of who we are. All of our worth is in our hypersexualization identity oftentimes.
And is that the hypersexuality identity known among the Black male and female, or is it more, you're saying that it's like a myth that is happening from non-Black toward Black?
So unfortunately, how I've been tracking this trauma story historically from post-slavery to present, it was something that was put on Black folks. But if you watch like cinema history, is a good place to kind of track it pretty easily. There was an era of time called Blaxploitation films, and this is a kind of a boom in Black cinema because it was an opportunity for Black directors and writers and actors to kind of put their story on the big screen. But it also was an opportunity where we saw what I would say is a visual place where we internalize the Black brute as a part of us. So this was no longer kind of the mainstream culture saying you're a Black brute. We took it on and be like, oh, if you're going to call us this, we're going to lean into this identity, entertain you on this, and make these, profound, at the time, impactful Blaxploitation films. They actually call them Blaxploitation films that cinematically are important for us. But story-wise, you'll start to see the kind of immersion of the hypersexualized Black male, which would be the equivalent of big portions of our hip hop culture today. The hypersexualized male is kind of the if you feel you'll feel the similar vibe where you won't see a lot of leading artists. We're seeing some exceptions to that with Kendrick Lamar in the last couple of years. But if you look over the spectrum of the last, let's say, 20 years of hip hop, we lean towards hypersexualization as a part of the positive. There was no critique or examination. Well, Blaxploitation had a similar theme where they weren't critiquing the Black brute. They were embracing it. They were even defining it to fit them even more. And we'll see that similar theme bleed into our modern day and even our older pornography imagery of similar imagery of this hypersexualized Black male. Excuse me. So in the context of where it comes from, if you look at the funders of these aggressive images, especially in hip hop today, they're funded by oftentimes white studio heads or non-Black folks are funding the infrastructure that makes it a really easeful thing to fund. So if you want to make something that is more tender or socially aware, it's hard to find a budget for it. It's hard to quite, but you want to find something that fits into that stereotype of what the Black brute embraces in gang culture and hip hop culture. And I wouldn't say hip hop culture exclusively gang culture. I won't say that far, but there is a relationship between hip hop and the gang culture that's been from almost its birth. I would say its birth, but as it got to mainstream culture, it started to become this kind of front-facing gang culture. And that narrative is a painful marker of where we have, I say we, Black men, have, I don't know if they even know how much. When I talk to a lot of brothers, they go, oh, I know what when you say Black brute and you describe it, I know what you're saying. But when you say the word Black brute, we don't use that word. Oh yeah, you're a Black brute. We don't use that phrase. It's more scholars or people that study the arc of the Black story in America that we'll see this phrase come up. Another phrase I've seen pop up is Black buck, which also can be a similar, to me, those are very interchangeable phrases to describe this kind of only wanting the physical attributes of the Black male body and nothing else. And I don't want his tenderness, his intelligence. We just want to use his body for a thing, where it might be. And so there's a way we've internalized it, but it was been funded and supported by, I think, the bigger white ecosystem of America. And it feels normal now. None of this feels extreme. This feels like, oh, it's a part of the background.
As you were sharing, this question showed up for me that there was a time before sexualization and I'm talking on a developmental stages of a human being that they're growing, right? Now, the opportunity for a person's emotion to be heard, to be accepted, to be shared within a family system, or even touch, right? The concept of what you shared, like a platonic, loving touch, starts from the family system, right? So right. When we looking at a family system. So as you were doing your research and the trauma research and kind of experiencing and asking, especially in the groups that you are running, how do you see the concept of allowing vulnerability, allowing the expression of tears as a form of expression of emotion, to be okay for men, for boys? And then the platonic touch that would come, for example, from a mother to a son, from a father to a son, from siblings to their brothers. How do you see that in the family system, let's say in the Black family system?
Yeah, so it's been these beautiful models where specifically I have witnessed and have talked to many Black mothers that have never pushed their child away from platonic touch. They're like, if he has I don't care if he's 15, 16, if he needs to be held, I hold him. And I would say in secret, there's been, I say secret meaning it's not known, of how much labor Black women and particularly Black mothers have contributed to preserving little pockets, little spaces for Black male tenders to be there. The other kind of where oppression can be really, really painful here is they struggle with that labor of holding my child softly and preparing him for the world he's actually going to live in. And so there's this place where Black families that have more economic access, financial privilege, are often, not always, but are often have more time and space to be tender and allow tenders to be available in their family, for their children, for their young men. Families that both parents are working multiple jobs or economics or a central struggle. One of the things that becomes apparent is they basically got the time for that level of space for tenderness and tears. And they also live in a community or a space where no one's being tender. Once you get out that front door, once you go out to the world, we have to find the shield it takes to survive working themselves through a neighborhood or a community or a region of the country where violence and toughness is survival essentials. Even if you are tender, we tuck it and hide it behind. We don't let that be a public facing thing. And so I think economic lines become, I see, a consistent threat to how much the family structure has space and capacity for tenders. Now, that being said, I have hung out with and know several Black families that are dealing with the middle of violence and have not given up on tenderness. Like, no, my son, he can always cry here. He can always, and they're it's clear for them. But when I look at the bigger picture and more numbers, that's not like a theme I see going through places where you have to be tough to get down the street. But there is a constant, I think, rhythm of space for it or inviting or desire for it. But the structures around are so effective at kind of smothering that opportunity, especially when you get into your teens and into your early 20s, because at that point you leave your mother's space and you might be with your boys or whatever else. And that's all of a sudden, if you had any kind of care, it might drip off. If you're in those privileged spaces, they oftentimes start to disappear right around 13, 14 when they're kind of developing their own friend group and community.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a family therapist. So, for 30 years, I've worked with families and very much this concept of that right around the teenagehood and the developmental stage of puberty, the touches between parents and siblings and the teen changes. Because
Right.
the teens, not only the notion changes, but the teen's body sometimes is so sensitive and so confusing that many of the boys would specifically purposely push their mothers away, push their sisters
Correct.
away, because they're trying to figure out their experience of their body and the distinctions between the sexuality and the platonic. I've worked with people, even girls, where they came to me when they were women, but the trauma that right around that age, like they used to be when they were young, they were always sitting on their father's lap and, hugging and all of that. And right around 12, 13, their father was like, no more, you can't sit here and you can only hug me from the side. And like the father became awkward and the girls like got traumatized. Like, I have no idea, what have I done wrong that my father's no longer touching me. So you're so accurate in seeing that, yes, there's a transitional time that becomes confusing for people within the family. And we're even talking with the families that touch was a common construct. Some families, touch wasn't really there, right? Like, allowing vulnerability wasn't, the expression of vulnerability wasn't there. It was always about toughen up, toughen up. But that is a critical time of shift from one realm to another. And what I'm hearing from you is that as you're working, and obviously you're seeing the cultural perspective, the gender cultural perspective also to be put on, the particularly Black men, and shifting this to your documentary and your work you do, and right now you're working with mentees and your group. There's a delicate place of how you said a distinction between these types of touches. How do you, in your work, create this type of distinction where your mentees can experience the need for that connection of their vulnerability, allow a receiving and allow a giving that is, a pure connection, a beautiful way of compassion and caring and loving, within, seeing someone and holding that touch, holding that hug, holding it in a space where it's, it holds its beauty and purity, and distinguishing it from, the level of, like you talked about, the hypersexuality. Can you share a little bit about your approach to that?
Yeah. So some of this is tedious and tender in a sense that we oftentimes are introducing boundaries and consent and self-examination of what your body has actually been through for the first time for some of these brothers that have not been in like therapy or workshops. The majority of them have not. And so this is all kind of like, oh, new observation. So one of the first things we try to establish is just what we call the story of one's body, right? We literally start from the top of their scalp all the way down to their toes of like, what's the story of your hair? What's the story of your face? What's the story? They might be like, well, I was always a good looking child. Everyone thought I was the cutest. Everyone always fawned over me. I remember I was looked at as always ugly. No one ever called me beautiful. It's the story of the face, regardless if it's 99% of this is not true one way or the other, but we want to just hear what the story of their house, of their community has told them. And this goes all the way down to their chest, their arms. My arms are too skinny, so on and so forth. And so there's a way that they can do it on their own or with support, depending on kind of spatial, kind of like trust they have with people around them. But we want to get a sense of just what has been said to them that sits on their skin, maybe unactivated until somebody reaches over, touches their shoulder, and they jump or they flinch because they're like, "Hey, I don't touch my shoulders because I don't like my neck or shoulder being touched because it's unsafe because of fill in the blank happened or I saw this thing." And other folks are like, "I have no problem." So getting a sense of just their own, touch story without any kind of healing involved, or if there is healing involved, we get to expose that. But most important for them, if they can just speak to how mainstream culture to personal family culture and community culture has shaped how they feel in their skin. And that's an advanced activity. It's a slow activity. It's more or less successful, different. But generally speaking, we try and get through that awareness before they try and do any kind of touch for anyone else or for themselves. That story needs to be important to be spoken to. Of course, if they've been violated or harmed or beaten, that needs to be also even bring to the forefront even more, because that would have impact on the story of their body. Once that's been dialed in, mostly for them, but hopefully for the collective, meaning people around them, the touch activists around them, the next thing we try to do almost right after that is singing. And that might feel equally as terrifying for folks. Like, I'm not, what's touch singing? Singing is as like public speaking. But with young men, I oftentimes bring up as like beatboxing, rapping, singing. We're kind of kicking it. It's not like choir class. It's like I'm making some beats with my voice. They're making some rhymes. They beatbox with me. I might hum a melody. It's very, very almost casual. You almost were kicking it, making music, but music starts to arrive. And then we oftentimes, based on what their, body story is, we try and build and or start, if they haven't built one already, a relationship with nature, meaning walking with your bare feet on the earth, walking holding clay. I do a lot of natural building, so getting their hands in the earth and building is another way we do it to start building community and connection. So this all happens before any of them are even reached for a touch. But the idea, if you look at the methodology, the idea is that self-awareness is that sonic energy of sound and music, which is historically such a medicine, and then it's nature. And then if those are all going well, then we might offer an opportunity for some touch, a handhold sitting, or any kind of like introduction of just like proximity touch exercises to try and see what kind of nervous system reacts to that touch, and then talking about every step of the way. So a little bit of a hand touch, then we debrief that one little touch for 5 minutes. How did that feel? What came up for you? What did you notice? And so in the film, you might even see some moments, especially the second film, where I kind of break down in the film. I kind of show myself bring a trans man and a Black cis male together in a very gentle, slow touch practice. And they had not touched prior to that moment. They had done some other work individually, but you watch how slowly and how much time we take. In the film, it cuts it up in pieces, but you'll see even in the film that this is not like, all right, let's cuddle up, pile on top of each other. We never do that with our work. It's always very much like you're 2 inches from touching. Let's pause it right there. What did you feel? What does your skin story, body story react to that? Right. And we talk about that. Literally talk about being 2 inches from each other. That's how we slow it down, especially early on. So they have a clear picture of a yes, a no, a hell no, a hell yes, I think so, and what does that actually mean? And so we have a clear, and we practice that language too. I think some of the best consent training I've ever seen is when brothers are figuring out how to touch or not touch each other, because they're very clear about like, their no's and their yeses, and other containers is like it's harder for them to kind of grab it.
It's a lot of mindfulness with a space where it's so safe. It is safe to feel, it's safe to experience, it's safe to share, it's safe to say yes, it's safe to say no. And it's all of that is available. So not only the person can be aware of themselves, but they have the capacity to share and be accepted for who they are, what they experience, what their desire is, what their boundaries are, and that all of that is accepted. Can you share a little bit about your movie, Dark and Tender? Listening is the first hug. This is, the sentence is so beautiful. So say a little bit more about this movie and the documentary, and what got you to want to share this with the world through a documentary lens.
This film, maybe for the average person, might not feel like one of the most important films they might see, right? Like, brothers touching. But for me, it's a person that loves film, and there's so many great films in the world with this current technology, which I love. Prior to this documentary coming out, I try and say this every time we talk about this movie, I could not find anywhere where I could find footage of Black men holding hands, listening to each other tenderly, thoughtfully, and also queer, straight, trans Black men, wealthy, poor, old, and young, in the same room. Like I said, out of that small group. And I say that because the diversity amongst the Black men matters. Not a bunch of college students would be great, all the same age, all the same proximate economic bracket. No, we're talking about 86-year-olds. We're talking about 65-year-olds. We're talking about 18-year-olds. We're talking about trans and queer and older and young and poor and wealthy in the same room, holding each other's hands going, I want to see you. That cocktail is the most precious 18 minutes of Black male tenderness that I have seen since that film came out 2 years ago. And I say that lightly, not lightly at all, because there's a way it can get lost. If you've done any kind of healing or you've done any kind of workshop, you might go, that's basic healing. If you go to fill in the blank, we do so much more. And the 100% truth is they have been, but not with Black men. There's this immediate drop off. I've been to so many retreats where they're eye gazing, we're looking at the mountains, we're in like hot tubs and all the salts and all. Yeah, wonderful. But you know who's not there? Black men. That's who was not there. No, who's not holding each other? Black men holding Black men. And so I just want to name that there's so much knowledge and history in that little short film, but what's more importantly is there is a a direct shock to the system if you allow it to be there. Of when you ask yourself, when was the last time I saw this? When was the last time this was normalized, cultivated, and invested into? Right? There's an investment into these brothers' tender experience. And so there's something that has been my journey since this practice has started is how do we invest money into Black men's tenderness and platonic touch and holding? And why is there no immediate budget available to it? How much it would support across the line our reduction of violence, our reduction of consent violations, our reduction of mental health collapse and crisis. So just so much when physical tender touch is present, so many things have to be in place. Good communication, time for it, a facilitator that invests in other Black men that are invested in as well. These are all things that have to be all currently existing, which those things also help everything else about Black male village and Black community and overall America. Like everyone benefits when these brothers are not in their trauma stories.
Yes. Safety has
Everyone benefits.
Safety has to happen, and safety has to be there so that the person, the man, can feel safe, so that they can be open with, who they are and how they can share themselves. And I hear you saying, and correct me if I didn't get it right. What I'm hearing you saying is that there is a prototype, like a character that has been put upon us as Black men, and that we also bought into it. And that is, tough and rough, and the only emotions that are acceptable to be showing is anger and toughness, and then hypersexualism. So those are the parts that it was more like they gave it to us and we accepted it. But the price internally was that we also disconnected with ourselves. We disconnected with a part of us which is tender. And there's a yearning for that. Consistently, there's a yearning not to only be connected to our soft part, but to also the soft part of our brothers and others, their sisters and other people who are in our world. And therefore, the yearning shows up. And the fear is that if I yearn for this, if I connect with that part of me, then I'll be weak and I'll be harmed. And I cannot fit into my society and in the roles that was given to me. And you're opening this path, which is, no, you don't need to lose your toughness. You just need to acquire your vulnerability and softness, or you could be completely integrated into all of you. And you can choose whatever you want whenever it's necessary, but not to completely take away a part of you because you're only performing, in one essence of, the toughness that has to be there. And this level of integration of all of you together is what you're promoting for, the Black men and, the whole society necessarily. So, has your work impacted the American Black men? And the other question showed up for me is this only in the American Black culture, or do you see that, internationally with all Blacks across the world, or do you see this more happening with Black men in U.S.?
It's definitely a First Nation, if I use that word, problem. I think cultures that have more of their indigenous roots still intact, we see a lot more options for touch, men holding hands. But as far as the modern day Black male in modern day culture, so any probably European, anywhere where we're financially quote unquote First Nation, you would see probably some level of this being intact. The other quote unquote third nations, poor nations, you're going to see a lot more opportunity for Black male touch and tenderness and village to be intact. Homophobia, unfortunately, does go rampant in some of those places, even if there's a lot of touch in place. But we do see where we'll call it, original cultures still being intact or influencing. We see a lot of touch, but the more successful or more financially, I should say, successful a country is, the more separation across all cultures, unfortunately, we see from the actual Platonic portions and village portions of our behavior. The speed in which capitalism typically runs at its best oftentimes leaves very little time for this kind of behavior, valuing this kind of behavior. And so I think there's a theme there, and I would say America's at the top of the list. I'm not sure of a more undertouched nation than America in so many ways. I'm sure parts of Europe and Asia have similar trauma stories, but I would say America is right there as number one in the trauma story.
And has your movie been touching the Black American men in the way that you intended to?
In the pockets that we were able to show this work, it has had a profound impact in my observation. As simple as it is, a very accessible film I can feel. But I don't feel like we've penetrated the big part of the culture yet. We have not had the kind of national conversation. I think of that book, Anxious Generation, excellent book. But I've seen that book have such an immediate legislative parenting. I mean, everywhere I look, there's great places where folks are reevaluating young people and their social media intake, which actually is a part of this trauma story we're talking about too in so many ways. That's why I think the book is so important. So I haven't seen that kind of impact, but I have seen a critical mass and a conversation started and a potential for the foundation being laid to be as interruptive as that book and other parts of good thinking in America have been. I feel also that, it depends on, I feel like we're in a good position to have the impact, and this conversation being one of the many steps we'll take to continue to raise the flag, motivate people to notice this conversation and to articulate it as well, to know how quickly they can participate in interrupting it. And in some ways, it's kind of like, what kind of legislation of limit young people from being on social media at a certain age. But this is like, how do we pass legislation to bring more Platonic touch? How do we de-invest in the Black brute when it's such a part of American culture? So I think there's a way that we're still figuring out angles to detangle the tender hearts from this very much uninterrupted Black brute narrative that's been kind of sitting in the background, unchecked, uncritiqued in a national level in a way that I think it should be. So I think we're on our way. And I feel like there's still opportunity, and I'm excited to be on this journey.
Beautiful. Everyone, go see this movie, Dark and Tender. I love this sentence. Listening is the first hug. Aaron Johnson, everyone. Anything we haven't shared that you really want people to know?
I think we covered most of the major pieces, but I just want to speak specifically to the parents that are raising children. The film talks more generally speaking, but we have a ever growing parent population, which feels so precious to get ahead of this trauma story. One of my favorite phrases to say is raising families that have the language, that have practices, that have intentions around having grounded, touch-grounded children in their whole. Not every child needs touch, but Black male children and male children as a whole having intentions and design as a parent around them feels like some of the most important things that we can talk about and think about. And so just know that we are working on several programming and workbooks for parents specifically around this touch material, and starting with African heritage children, Black male children, but really want to make sure that we address the common trauma stories in Black males in general, but knowing that where the differences are and where the similarities are. And also just want to really put a big hands of support behind the parents that have expressed their need and that already are doing good touch practice and culture in these families. I feel like this is where the work really is going to see long-term change as a parent. So I just want to put a shout out and an invitation to keep engaging with us, keep asking us, keep sharing your stories, keep sharing your practices with us, because it's a circular learning practice. We build things in our team and with our families we know, but when it goes into the wild, we'll say into the world, how you all adapt it, change it, modify it matters as much as anything else, because this is a village activity.
Beautiful. Where can people find you and your documentary?
Right. So cutproject.org is how you can find us and all of our updates, our newsletters. It's a great place to keep track of us as we raise the flag and roll out new programs and new projects, new films.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me for another heartfelt conversation on Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan. If today's episode touched you, I invite you to make 3 simple actions. 1, follow Inner Voice on Apple Podcast or Spotify or iHeartRadio or YouTube or anywhere else that you listen to it. Share this episode with one person who may need hope, clarity, or support, or what we talked about, and it really touches their heart. Leave a kind rating or a recommendation on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, or Spotify so more people can find these healing conversations. You can connect with me at awarenessintegration.com, IAII.life, or my own FoojanZeine.com, and learn more about psychotherapy, coaching, mind and body services, functional medicine in groups, and the Foojan app, and Mira, which is an AI chatbot, which is very much trained in the awareness integration. So through the International Awareness Integration Institute, you can tap into all of them. Until next time, listen to your inner voice, lead with awareness, and live a fulfilled life. Now.
Awareness, integration theory, certification programs. If you're a psychotherapist, clinician, or coach ready to elevate your impact, I invite you to become certified in the Awareness Integration Theory, AIT model. AIT is a structured, evidence-informed approach that strengthens emotional regulation, reduces anxiety and depression patterns, and helps clients create lasting change. Our training is practical, clear, and immediately usable in sessions, so you can work with more confidence and consistency. Join a global community of practitioners shaping the future of integrative mental health. Become AIT certified today. Visit awarenessintegration.com.